A reading from the Gospel, the Good News according to John. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the doors were locked where the disciples were for fear, Jesus came and stood in their midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." And when he said this, he showed them his hands, his side. And the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. And Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. Whose sins you forgive, they are forgiven them. Whose sins you retain, they are retained." And Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples said to him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, put my finger in the nail marks, put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now a week later, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, although the doors were locked, stood in their midst and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Bring your hand and put it into my side. And do not be unbelieving, but believe." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord, my God." And Jesus said to him, "Have you come to believe because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed." Now Jesus did many other things in signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that through this belief you might have life in his name. The Gospel of the Lord. The resurrection is the deal breaker, is it not? The resurrection of Jesus Christ is what makes us Christians. It's what separates Jesus from being another holy teacher, a wise man, a conveyor of an ethic of life. No, the resurrection of Jesus is the central element of Christian faith. And we, the church, will spend the next 6 weeks reflecting on just what it means to believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Because it was not even self-evident what this means or how to believe in it for those who were there when it happened. So we stand on a history, a tradition of disciples whose understanding of the resurrection is filled with both hope and doubt. Now, as we go through these next 6 weeks, there's a paradigm I want to suggest to you. A paradigm that we can use with each gospel that speaks about just what is the state of our faith in the resurrection of Jesus. Now, the first side of the resurrection, and for some the most difficult and impossible one, is the fact that God did in fact raise Jesus from the dead by the power of the Holy Spirit to the glory of God the Father. That Jesus rose from the dead into life and love that had no end. Into life with God that never ends, love that never ends, loving that never ends. But if the extent of our belief is in this alone, that God so loved Jesus that he was raised from the dead, then we are wasting our time. Someone no less than Paul says that if our belief is that Jesus and Jesus alone is raised by the Spirit to the glory of God, then we are the most pitiable of people. If our hope is for this life only, then we are forlorn. For the resurrection of Jesus is not simply an experience. The faith in Jesus' resurrection is not just a statement of belief in an historical love that God had for Jesus that brought him to life and love without end. But it must also extend to who we are. That faith in the resurrection of Jesus must also somehow not be a faith in the love of God that changed Jesus from death to life, but it has to be a faith that changes us, that raises us to a new way of living and loving and being. Now, let's just take that paradigm and employ it in this one story that we hear in today's gospel. Jesus appears in the midst of the disciples who were locked in fear, who believed nothing, all who had betrayed him, and says to them, "Peace, peace, peace be with you. Be at peace, be neither anxious nor guilty, nor depressed, nor sad. Be at peace. Let your heart, your soul, be at peace." For the first message of the resurrection is that the love of God that raised Jesus from the dead forgives even the faults and failures and fractured loving of those who had betrayed him, denied him, who at that moment did not even believe in his resurrection.